I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Friday, November the 1st, brought to you in part by NationalBeefWire.com. Several representatives from DV Auction and National Beef Wire will be at Reno, Nevada for the Angus Convention this weekend. Be sure and hunt them up, stop by the booth. It'll be a good time to book your sale, your spring sale if you got a production sale coming up. And it'd be a good time to get that done. You can talk to them about getting your video work done if you just want to have a TV sale and not run the bulls through the ring. If you're interested in this National Beef Wire, you want to learn more about it, it'd be a good time to do that. If you want to advertise on there, if you've got an auction market, you would like to do automated market reporting on there, it'd be a good time to do that. But should be a good crowd there for the Angus Convention in Reno, Nevada. I'm sure a lot of them are going to have a good time. I'm not going to be going out to that trip, but we've got several representatives that are going, and I'm sure I'll get to hear all the stories from Reno, Nevada. But let's look at what's going on in your cattle business. We've got several bills that's been introduced this week, and it's amazing that they've had time to do anything. The way that they're wanting to impeach our duly elected president that we're all kind of supporting here on the ag side, and they try to make like that the ag people have lost their confidence in them, but whenever you get out in the country and talk to people, everybody's still pretty well pro-Trump, because the main reason they're looking at the alternative, which there really is no realistic alternative as far as most of us are concerned. But you look at some of the things that are going on there. The Real Meat Act, which has been introduced this past week here, is legislation that would force all these fake meat products, whether they're plant-based or cell-cultured, to be labeled as imitation meat. Fantastic. Hey, we'd be all about that. We'd like to get something like that going, and we've got some bipartisan interest in that, and that would be fantastic if we could get that pushed through, and we hope we get that done. Another thing that's come out here later in the week is COOL, country of origin labeling. You don't hear me talk a lot about COOL because it's very polarizing. I'm a polarizing figure enough without talking about something like COOL that's even more polarizing, but we've got a lot of supporters for COOL, country of origin labeling, and we feel like that is a good way to increase the demand for our beef, as if we need any more demand for beef. Our beef demand is not the problem in this industry, guys. It's trying to get our share of that retail market price. Because in 2018 we set an all-time record for getting the smallest percentage, I'm talking about the producers, getting the smallest percentage of the retail beef price. And in 2019 we're going to blow that 2018 record all to pieces because of the disparity that happened after the fire at Holcomb, Kansas, and all the advantage that was taken there and the price gouging and what have you. But there's a lot of people that think COOL will solve a lot of problems, but we finally got at least somebody acknowledging that there's a lot of producers out there that's pushing COOL. There was a resolution to reinstate COOL put out by Jon Tester, who is from Montana, a congressman there from Montana, or senator, and he comes from a very rural part of Montana, and he's a Democrat. But the resolution to reinstate COOL. See if we can get anything done with that. I know a lot of people would love to see that happen. But then also at the same time, we saw a bill introduced by a couple of South Dakota politicians, John Thune and Mike Rounds, and it's called the U.S. Beef Integrity Act. Now this takes probably the biggest thing that people are going on about COOL, and then putting it into a bill that's introduced, saying that you cannot put on the label of beef that it is a product of the USA unless it is a product of the USA. The biggest problem that most people that are pro-COOL are talking about is they're bringing in foreign beef You know, they may not be completely broken down or fabricated, but they're bringing in sides and mixing it in. If it's a ground product, or using it in some form or fashion, and still calling it a product of the USA just because it's finalized here in the United States. And that makes a lot of people mad, and that's why the biggest promotion for Pro Cool is for consumers to demand U.S. beef, real USA beef. Well, this U.S. Beef Integrity Act would take care of a lot of that if they could do it. It would say it has to be USA beef to put on the label that it's a product of the USA. And so that's something you got to look at. Now, what's the best way to go here? Well, you know, it's just it's whatever you think it ought to be, but I don't know if everything has to be mandatory. The thing about cool is country of origin labeling. It's not just cool; it's mandatory cool. So they're saying that every piece of meat, beef that comes out there, it's got to have a list of every single country that could be involved in that. Now, do we need that, or do we just need it to state that if it's a product totally of the USA, it can say that on the label, and if it's not a product of the USA, it can't say that on the label? That's kind of where everybody really, the rubber hits the road, and you think, by God, we want real USA beef. Yeah, but the problem is we trade with a lot of other people, and mainly I'm going to talk about Canada. They're a wonderful neighbor. They're a wonderful purchaser of our live cattle. They take them up there, they harvest them, they send that somewhere else. It helps us get rid of our supplies, and they buy a lot of our beef products. And they raise a lot of beef themselves. Let's just put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say that they were putting on their label, said this is USA beef, not so people would eat it, but so people wouldn't eat it. And it just goes back there to, you know, how do you want to treat your neighbors, and how do you want this to go? And I know some of you guys have got smoke coming out your ears right now, but I'm just having a conversation here. And then you've got Mexico down there. They buy a ton of our meat products, our beef products, and they do send some cattle over here. We don't send that many cattle down there because they don't have much money. And they don't feed near as many cattle as we do in the United States, or even as much as in Canada. But we do get a lot of cattle from down there. A lot of people like their cattle because they're so hardy and they don't have a lot of health problems with them. But you know, we need to figure out where we're at on this and pick our battles. Which fight do we really want to fight? The biggest problem with promoting mandatory cool is, you know, they didn't wake up. We had it at one time. They didn't wake up one day and say, hey, we don't like this anymore, let's get rid of it. They found that it was against rules of the World Trade Organization, and that's a problem. And I'm not sure that if half of 1% of one country, being us in the cattle business in the United States, are big enough to get them to trade those World Trade Organization rules or not. Probably be kind of tough. Probably be easier to get behind this U.S. Beef Integrity Act and say, if you want to put on the label it's a product of the USA, by God, it's a product of the USA. And then build a market for that, make that a premium. And if your packers get more money for that product, then they're going to demand more of that just USA product, and then they're going to start backing away from some of the foreign beef that's coming in. The thing that didn't work very good with Cool is it didn't include food service or restaurants. And at that time, back when cattle were really high, whenever it was in 2013, 14, then you know, your fast food places, this was before fake meat come around, they were still wanting to sell 99-cent and $1.99 hamburgers, and it was kind of tough because the ground beef product was so high. So yeah, they're getting, you know, ground up water buffalo from Uruguay or somewhere, and they're bringing it in, but nobody knew anything about it because Cool didn't take care of that, because it was in a restaurant or it was through food service. And if we are going to get Cool back, That would be great. It'd be nice to know where our stuff is coming through. But the main thing that would be good is the thing that U.S. Beef Integrity Act takes care of, which is, you know, by God, if it's a product of the USA, it really is a product of the USA. But we need to kind of pick our battles here, and I don't know if mandatory this or mandatory, it's kind of like your mandatory RFID tagging there. Do we have to make that mandatory? I realize we need some things to be mandatory for safety or for health, and that could fall under that in case we have some kind of a disease outbreak there. But you know, it's going to force so many people out of business because they just decided that enough's enough. They're not going to do it. They're not going to, you know, pay for electronic tag, and probably a lot of the small producers would have to hire somebody to put that tag in, or they, you know, and they just aren't going to embrace that. There's so many of them, and you guys know them. Maybe you can call them hard-headed, and, you know, and well, to heck with them if they don't want to get with the times. We need as many of our small producers as we can get. Those small producers support your auction markets. Your order buyers are able to buy cattle off of them a lot of times at a discount because they don't do all the things and add all the value that they need to add. There's a lot of small producers. We're not all just big ranchers. Not all of us had a ranch given to us by our grandpa or our dad, and we're able to run that. A lot of us, when, you know, if I want to run cattle, I got to go out there and lease a place and try to buy cattle as cheap as I can and operate as cheap as I can. You know, I'm not going to be going after chopped genetics or anything like that. That's the way a lot of your small producers are. They're just doing it because they love to do it, and they're just trying to scratch out enough money to do it to justify doing it. And you know, and they just hate to have these rules come in on them that they mandatory. By God, you got to do this. What if a guy's got a little herd of cows out there, or he likes to background a few calves, buy some off his neighbors or whatever, and turn them out on the grass that he's got? Is, you know, and he doesn't put the mandatory RFID tags in there, and they get that pushed through. What are they going to do? Take his birthday away? You know, just make a rule where he can't own any cattle? You know, put him in jail? You know, what are they going to do? You know, all this mandatory stuff. You know, the reason we like being in the cattle business is because we can do what we want to do when we want to do it. Cattle are one of the most liquid assets in the world. Here in the United States, you can turn them into cash 6 days a week. You can go get you a check, take that check immediately to the bank, whether your sale barn's been paid or not, turn that into cash and go to Vegas and put it on red if you want to. It's fantastic. You know, the more of these mandatory this and mandatory that we put on them, you know, the less free we are in this industry to do what we want to do. You know, what else could we make mandatory? If we're going to start doing mandatory, we could fix this this lack of negotiated trade. We just say it's mandatory. You got to sell your fat cattle in some kind of a competitive fashion. By God, and we're going to take advantage of these markets when we get that leverage built back up. You're mandatory. You can't get into some kind of a sweetheart deal with a packer and promise them your cattle for months on end or forever as long as you have cattle based on some loose basis price. You know, let's make it mandatory. You got to do that. While we're doing that, let's make it mandatory that you got to wean all your calves 60 days. By gosh, you got to do that. You got to cut your bulls before they're 6 months old. It's mandatory, you know. And a lot of you guys that like to buy those high-risk cattle at a discount, you're thinking, I don't know about that. I kind of like to add that value myself. See, that's the way the world goes round, you know. Let's make it more mandatory. Let's make it mandatory that those Simmental people make the good black Simmentals with the black Sim Angus crosses, and they can't have those flowery ones anymore. Let's make it that you can't have Toyota pickups if you own cattle. You can have one of those older small ones with the flatbed, a little chore pickup, but not the big one that you take to the sale barns and to the rodeos on the weekends. Can't do that. You know, we could put a lot of things in here mandatory if we want to, but it just limits our freedom within this industry, and I'm not sure how much we want to do that. So now that I got everybody mad, let's talk about the market. Look at the board on Thursday. October live cattle futures down $1.70, but that was just jostling right here at the end of as you start getting into the maturity of that month there. We had a lot of deliveries against that contract, a lot of things going on, but 111.67, you see that December was off 107 at 117.22. A lot of people are starting to think that we're going to see a kind of a jump back. We're going to see a correction in this market because it's been going up for so long. You know, anytime you get a market going in one direction, especially a commodity market, all your analysts get real nervous thinking that it's going to have to retrace that a little bit, and most of them are getting that way right now. So if enough of them get to thinking that and they start betting on it, by gosh, it's going to happen, and you might want to get in too. But if we do have a little fallback in the market, especially just on the board, not so much on the cash, just expect it to take back off and start running again. October feeder cattle down 7 cents at 145.95. November down 27 at 147.60. Your fat cattle trade, we have not seen the bulk of the fat cattle trade yet. We saw a pretty good slug in the Southern Plains at 112, which that was $2 higher, and that was great. But a lot of the guys are betting on more than that. Because you look now, your spot market is like 117.22 on December. That's what we're looking at, because October's gone. They're still doing a few deliveries on it, but they'll take care of those, and then December is what we're looking at. Iowa sold a handful of cattle at 113. That's the tops for your live price right now, but a lot of people are thinking 115 maybe. You know, maybe even in the Southern Plains. It'll be very interesting to see what happens here on Friday, and it might take Saturday morning to get it done. Kansas sold just a few more cattle at 112, and then some dressed at 177. We haven't seen any dressed market in the Northern Plains yet. It might be $1.80 or better. And so we're going to see some significant gains here on our fat cattle market this week. Box beef cutout values have absolutely soared this week. We saw your selects were over $3 higher on Wednesday. On Thursday we come back in, and this time it was your choice that gained all the ground. Choice cuts on Thursday afternoon up $2.13 at 232.18. Your selects were actually off 18 cents, but after going up $3 and something on Wednesday, that's not bad at all. Your selects ended at 206.49. That huge spread of $25.69 between the choice and select. But you know, those choice cuts have gained over $20 here just in the last 3 weeks or so, and it's just unbelievable how much they've gained and how good that demand is. We know we always have good demand for beef for the most part. You know, everybody wants it to be better, but my gosh, we got competitors out there. We got other proteins out there. You know, you got to be realistic about this. You know, you don't want to price yourself out of the market. But, you know, we've got good demand. We just need to somehow get a bigger piece of that pie. That's between what people are paying either in the restaurant on the plate for their steak, or even the people that are buying them in the supermarkets crowd backed. What that price is and what your producers are getting paid in, there is a lot of gravy in there, guys, and we would sure like to get a little more of our share of it. Look at the slaughter for the week through Thursday, 466,000. That's 7,000 less than last week and 14,000 less than the same week a year ago. But hoping to make up a lot of that on Saturday. Your actual slaughter data for the week ending October the 19th had your average dressed steer weight at 900 pounds. That was down just 1 pound from the previous report. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on Cattle Market Central. I want you to pay attention. We're right here at the maturity of our October feeder cattle contract. Our real-time index is at 145.23, off 1 penny from Wednesday's close. And look at what your CME cash feeder cattle index is. 145.23. They're exactly the same right here at the maturity of one of your feeder cattle contract months there. And I tell you what, our RTI is completely automated. It's always up to date. Nobody has to run around punching information in there to get it. It comes right from the auction markets, right from the block, goes through the clerk systems. We've got third-party verification there because it's all computerized, and it's a neutral, non-biased way that it's put together. And we think it's a pretty valuable number, and we think more of you should pay attention to it and look at it because it is a very valuable number. Let's look at some of your auction markets on Thursday. Farmers and Ranchers Livestock, Salina, Kansas. It really got nasty there on Thursday. Wintry weather and cold and miserable. Raw all day there, 2,300 head. Feeder steers weighing 8 to 950 were $3 to $9 higher. I tell you what, if you got a yearling, you can sell it, guys. I mean, you can pretty much name your price if it's got quality to it, for sure. Feeder heifers, 7 to 1050, well, $1 to $3 higher, so good market there. Salina, Kansas. Winter livestock and Pratt, 1,800 head, kind of a lighter run there for them for this time of year, but feeder steers there were steady. Feeder heifers steady to actually $2 off. But look at this steer quote on some thinner, sure enough, true yearlings there. 64 head and Pratt weighed 807. Big old load of steers there, bring 156, weighing over 8. Wow. Ogallala Livestock Auction, 4,900 head there. Dwayne Mays and company there, they just have great sales. And this one had some red-hided influence on it. A lot of good cattle in there. Steady to $7 higher in Ogallala, and they had some outstanding quotes there with some, some 5-weight calves bringing up to 170 and a pinch over. A lot of them in the 160s, and we know that the market on those best 5-weight steers is really just in the 150 somewhere. And it's kind of the same in the Southern Plains as it is in the Northern Plains, because the Southern Plains has winter wheat grazing demand. But Valentine Livestock Market, Valentine, Nebraska, 5,400 head there. Market was steady to $5 higher. And look at this quote on 7-weight steers, and there got to be calves, guys. 148 head of 720-pound steer. And actually, these were yearlings, because Greg did tell me that. They were true yearlings. They were light yearling cattle, been turned out. And that's why they bring the big money. 148 head, 720-pound steers, 170. That's your feeder flash for Friday.